show today? Are you on Clay's show today? Did you already do it? Nice. In person? That's perfect. That's great.
Thanks a lot.
Hi.
Have you sit right here?
I'm gonna be over here, okay.
Yeah, right on this side.
Thank you.
Get some water here for you.
Thank you. And you probably don't want us to move these microphones?
Yeah, we'll go through a couple things about the mics and all.
Okay.
Hi, Representative.
Hi, how are you? I do, yeah.
Is it silent?
Yeah.
Hey, how are you? Yep.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me, I'd like tap water, please.
Sorry.
If you only knew the conversation we had before that.
Oh, did this already get discussed?
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to be the first question.
Good to see you, Lisa. How's family? Family good?
Hanging in there.
You had a birthday.
Taylor's birthday yesterday.
Beautiful. Tell her I said happy birthday, would you please? Good to see you as well.
So just wanted to go over a couple things. If you look, there's a piece of white tape. If you can try to stay somewhat centered on that piece of white tape.
Right here?
Yep.
Oh, what if we write stuff? Okay, put it this way.
You know, the other thing, we're going for radio on this, so we want to make sure you get in nice close on those microphones. If you're talking to the person next to you, don't turn away from the microphone. Work around it. So do something
Like
more
this?
like this. Yeah, so that you're not going away from the microphone.
Okay.
You do that. I think, Brian, is there anything else we need to go over?
I think that'll do it, yeah.
All right.
And we're going to treat this as though this is airing live on the radio, but it will air on Friday. It's airing live on the internet, so I think starting at 2 o'clock, that'll be our go time. So we'll kind of give it another minute or so, and we'll be ready
Should
to
we
go.
have coasters? This feels like we should have coasters. I'm just saying. Okay.
We'll bill you.
Right.
It's very nice wood. I agree.
I mean,
It's just polite to have.
About 30 seconds, so take that last deep breath if you need to. You're good. Good afternoon. This is NPR News. I'm Brian Bakst. We're coming to you from the UBS Forum in St. Paul. In just a few weeks, November 4th is Election Day, St. Paul will choose a mayor in a ranked choice election. Voters will see 5 names on their ballots, but there are a few who have the most visibility in the race. Along with our partners at the St. Paul Pioneer Press, we're here with the leading candidates for St. Paul mayor. They are 2-term incumbent Mayor Melvin Carter, State Representative Kaohly Her, and Yan Chen, a scientist and business owner. There aren't a lot of ground rules to go over. All 3 of you will have plenty of chances to get your views across, and we'll offer spaces for responses where it is appropriate. There's no hard clock. We're asking you, though, to be as succinct as possible in your answers so we can cover as many topics as possible. Here's the one critical rule. You can't all talk at once because people listening won't be able to understand what you're trying to say. With me today to ask the questions is Fred Melo, a City Hall reporter for the St. Paul Pioneer Press, who has been on the City Hall beat for 15 years. Glad you're here, Fred. Take it away.
Thanks, Brian. We're going to open with questions about economic development and the general vibrancy of the capital city. And we'll start with Mayor Melvin Carter. When you were running for this job the first time in 2017, you told me this. This is a quote. "What we need is a whole lot more jobs, a whole lot more housing, and economic development to give us the tax base to sustain our growing population." It's been 8 years. How do you think you delivered on that, and how would you rate your own progress there?
Well, first, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you guys hosting us and having us here. I tell my wife every day that I have the best job on the planet, and she looks at me and says, well, you sure picked the wrong 8 years to do it, because I will say that every single plan, every single hope, every single ambition, every single initiative that we dreamed up back in 2017, 2018, have been interrupted by a global pandemic, by the murder of George Floyd, by a historic national homeless crisis, a historic national drug crisis, runaway inflation, the sudden death of our largest property owner downtown, a cyber attack, and 2 Trump presidencies, just to name a few of those things. In the midst of those things, I do think that we've made significant progress in our city, and here we are today celebrating the fact that we've seen double-digit decreases in violent crime in every category of violent crime, that we have over $1 billion in economic development underway. That's downtown, that's in the Heights in the Highland Bridge area, in the Heights and on the east side in Highland Bridge area, that's downtown in our Midway area around soccer, so that we have pushed significantly. We haven't been immune from the global storms and the global winds that have hit every single city in the country, but I'm really proud of the way St. Paul has stood up.
Representative Her, you've identified some of the same issues as priorities, but you say economic development has stalled. Is there a specific policy or set of policies of the Carter administration that you believe caused that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me on today. I think that we do have to look at the fact that the reality in front of us is that it has stalled. And when we look at some of the key factors that led to that is, one, we talk a lot about, the Madison Equities death of the owner of that. But, specifically, I read in an article very recently that the mayor stated that he saw red flags 15 years ago when he was actually a city council member. When you see red flags, you cannot let issues go unaddressed. We could have done things like actually work with the state and work with putting renters who are actually paying their rent into a rent escrow where the courts would have held that money. And in order for Madison Equities to get that funding, they would have had to fix their properties. Those are tools that already exist for decades that that were not utilized. When we think about what happened with rent control, that though I've been a huge proponent of tenant protections, rent control itself decreased our ability for businesses and for developers to want to develop in the city of St. Paul. That these are issues that we literally created policies which said that we would not make ourselves as competitive as other cities. And so those are just a few things. In addition, if you look at the support of Black and brown businesses, minority-owned businesses, and the ability for them to actually get access through the city, if you look at the percentages of which we approve contracts and work with them, that we actually have done less in this administration than the previous administration, that the focus on small businesses and innovative Black and brown businesses specifically specifically that we've invested less into them. These all contributed to
Mayor,
it.
hang tight for a sec. Fred's going to try to get Yan Chen into this conversation. We'll come back to you for sure.
Yeah, Yan, you're the only one here who is not a part of government now, obviously. How dramatic of a shift in course on matters like economic development can voters expect if you were mayor?
I would say I would do everything differently, right? Because the matter of fact is what I see our government have been doing. They either ignore the problem at the root cause or throw money at the private business and wish they can solve the problem for them. Neither solution will work. I think for government, really need to figure out the root cause of individual problem and learn how to adapt. Because at the end of the day, we always will face challenges. If government doesn't know how to adapt, innovative, we will never succeed. I think America famous for its innovation, and the government needed to be innovative too.
Mayor, to the suggestion that you missed some red flags and rent control is part of the problem, what do you want to say?
Well, the first thing that Representative Her is right about is there have been long-term red flags. The downtown St. Paul that I grew up in was centered around department stores and office buildings. The internet happened to department stores, we all know that, and the pandemic fundamentally shifted the way work patterns happen. So when those two things got pulled, what was supposed to be our organizing principle? We have an incredible asset in the Minnesota Wild and the Grand Casino Arena. That's one of the reasons why I believe we ought to be investing in that facility. My opponents oppose that investment, which I think is short-sighted. But just because you weren't a part of those conversations doesn't mean those conversations didn't happen. When I got elected mayor, to the point that you asked, Fred, we were the largest city in America not to have an independent organization like the Downtown Alliance, which is why on day one we went to work building that in partnership with corporate and civic leaders. That's really critical. And to the question of the work that we did under the previous administration to expand our city's ability to contract with disenfranchised and disadvantaged vendors, businesses run by women, people of color, et cetera. All of those things are the work that I did. If you look at the ordinances that empower all of those things, it's my signature as the sponsor. I built that work, and we've, of course, continued it.
Here's a question about a very specific downtown economic development project, and this one is for Representative Her. St. Paul has floated the idea of building a downtown walkway, a promenade, called the River Balcony, that would cost taxpayers $114 million. That's not a small amount. Is that a project you would advance if you were the mayor? And where would it fit in your kind of priority list of revitalization plans?
And thank you for the question, Fred. So the river balcony is actually something that, a project that has come to the legislature and requested for bonding. This is a Ramsey County proposal, and it had the city's backing. I will say that I will group the river balcony in with all of the ways in which the city has come to the legislature for bonding, is that when you're a partner who doesn't actually show up to have conversations with your legislative delegation, that it creates problems for you to be able to get bonding bills passed. And so the Minnesota Wild, I'm very much in favor of the city making sure that it takes care of its assets. But when you don't return phone calls to your St. Paul delegation members and you don't work with them actively in order to push these agenda forward, you will have problems passing bills because an individual doesn't pass bills by themselves. They have to get the buy-in of other legislators in order to do so. I will say that the river balcony is an interesting idea, but I've asked many questions around the river balcony. If the goal is to be able to have people have access to the water, which was one of the priorities in which they told me it gets people closer to the water, there's actually not access from the river balcony to the water. And two questions around how we mitigate the fact of that flooding, when the 100-year floodings is actually greater, they're happening more frequently, and that what was the plan for how to deal with flooding and the impact on the building is that I did not get sufficient answers for that because I had already done tours of the properties that are along the river, and we have one park along the river that it costs us $1 million every time it floods in order for us to clean that park up. I did this tour with Works and with Parks, and so we cannot keep building and putting money into assets that we continually have to put money into fixing it, and people can't use most of the year. And so these are all things that go into when we want to build buildings, why it is we're building it, and how is it going to be sustained.
Mayor, 30 seconds to the suggestion that you're not consulting enough with the delegation up at the Capitol.
Well, one, that's what assets are. if you have an asset, you have to continue to invest in it. The notion that we should build infrastructure that we don't have to invest in sounds like a fairy tale. I sure wish the world worked that way. We do engage our legislators quite a bit. This is a topic that I would love your leadership on, Representative. But for you to say that you just have questions about things that have been to the Capitol, that have, whether it's us talking about Summit Avenue or us talking about our river balcony. Our river balcony is incredible. As I talked about our organizing principles downtown, we have more riverfront than any American city. But we don't really use it for things like that. And to say we shouldn't do a river balcony because you can't dip your toe into the water from the river balcony is ridiculous. And it's a type of second guessing that we don't have the opportunity for in the mayor's office.
Yan Chen, on your watch, would you go forward with some of these projects, the balcony, the Mississippi River Learning Center at Crosby Farm, the North End Regional Athletic Complex, some of those things that have hefty price tags?
Not as the high priority, right? Everything, I think we want development. We love our river, but everything need to come with the right order. If we do something in advance without consideration all the organic growth of our downtown, it will be another shining project. It has no sustainability, right? For downtown, we need to figure out the crime issue. People need to feel safe, and the residents need to have the place to shop first before we even think about the developer. But we can prepare shovel-ready project. Whenever there is money coming in along the way, we should take it. But that's only for planning purpose, not as priority. Not using our city money, bonding money immediately for this kind of project.
Mayor Carter, what's the case you would make for some of these projects? Crosby Farm Regional Park, North End Regional Athletic Complex, the new Como Park Pavilion. Is it time to scale them back given the city's finances?
We have one of the largest, one of the best top-ranked park systems in the country every single year. And that's a selling point for our city. And so this prevent defense that we hear to try to keep St. Paul just the same St. Paul that we were in the 80s or the same St. Paul that we were in the 90s or the same St. Paul that we were in the 2000s just isn't good enough. We have to do the Wayne Gretzkyism, skate to where the puck is going. Cities that have parks, cities that have amenities, cities that have good quality infrastructure, and cities that invest to keep that infrastructure kind of on the front end are going to be the cities that compete and succeed in the future. We ought to be there. That ought to be what we aspire to, not a city that, cuts our parks and recreation and libraries as Representative Her has proposed, or a city that penny pinches when it comes to building high quality infrastructure on the river.
Quick response and we'll move on.
A city need to have its soul. The soul is always coming from the people, not coming from buildings. Right now, when I talk to the residents in Ward 1, people say, where's our programs? 1980, 1990, we have much more programs than what we currently have. Right now, what I see, it is easy to throw money at the problems without thinking about how to invest in people, because people are our base.
Representative Her, you heard the mayor bring it up, the Grand Casino Arena, and it's one of the things that really draws visitors from around the state to the city. What level of financial participation should the city of St. Paul have in that pending proposal to remodel it, the place formerly called the Xcel Energy Center?
Well, I actually would like to address the issue from the mayor's perspective, invest in our infrastructure. I want to be very clear. Investing in your infrastructure doesn't mean continuing to build new things. We have hundreds of millions of dollars, over $200 million of liabilities, deferred maintenance in our libraries and parks. We have over $100 million in fire. We have hundreds of millions of dollars. We've prepared nothing for and how to deal with these deferred liabilities. These are costs coming to our city. So if we are being responsible, that is not investing in our city. That is not taking care of our infrastructure. And I also want to be really clear that it is our job to ask questions. That to sit here and say that we can just bring up these great ideas and not have to ask the hard questions, that's our job to be responsible with taxpayers' dollars. And so for us to say that, to dismiss that asking questions is because someone can't dip their toes, there are legitimate questions to the future costs when we don't ask these questions. And I will say,
specific to the arena project.
Specific to the arena, that it is a city asset. What I will tell you is that what was lacking from the city when it came up to ask for the funding is it never told people, this is our asset that we need to maintain. And what does that partnership look like? Because we've had these assets for a long time. This mayor has been in office for 8 years. If you are then taking care of your infrastructure, why have you not planned for how you're going to do this? I will be very clear. At the state legislature, the bonding chair has been very clearly saying to people, when you come up to ask for money for bonding, you better have a plan for how you're going to take care of that asset so that you don't keep coming back to the state for funding. That is just responsible planning for your city, which has been lacking over these 8 years.
Mayor Carter, can you get that project across the finish line in your next term?
Well, I imagine Representative Her has a lot to say to Mayor Norm Coleman, who set that financing up several years ago. And Representative, nobody said you can't ask questions. You have to ask questions, but you can't hide behind "I still have questions" to avoid having to take a firm stance in a campaign. That's what you can't. That's what we don't have the opportunity to do.
Point is that you
and
think
I'll
people are
continue my
avoiding.
statement is that I think Yan Chen brings up a good point. We have to be a city that invests in our people. And this is something that has been a hallmark of our administration, as we have led the nation on things like college savings accounts, on things like a guaranteed income, on things like leveraging American Rescue Plan funding to pay off medical debt, and inheritance fund to help people build homes rebuild their wealth through home ownership. Investing in our people has been a critical hallmark of our administration.
We want to get to another topic now, and Fred is going to lead us off with a question about property taxes.
Yeah, we're going to shift gears here a bit. Back to Mayor Carter. How do you respond to those who point to the city's new sales tax, rising water and sewer charges next year, a rising property tax levy, and say affordability for city residents has just become too difficult?
It's accurate. Affordability for everyone has become too difficult. We also know that our gas prices have gone up and our grocery prices have gone up and our electricity prices have gone up. And those same people expect us to put gas in every single police car and every single fire truck, except for the electric fire truck that we bought, because we bought the state's first fully electric fire truck. So yes, expenses have gone up for everybody. And this is actually one of the core reasons why we have to do a couple of things. We have to invest deeply in our downtown, because one of the major impacts is the fact that, as you know, again, we lost our largest property owner downtown, passed away suddenly about 1.5 years ago. That whole portfolio collapsed. And when we collect less dollars downtown, what does that do to our residential property taxes? It pushes them up. It's another actually reason why we have to do a sales tax, why we have to do a franchise fee, why we have to diversify our revenue. Any private business will be trying to figure out how to diversify their revenue. And when we do that, we talk a lot about the percentage of properties in our city that are owned by non-tax paying properties, whether that's our hospitals or our universities and things like that. Those places who don't pay property taxes do chip in for our franchise fee. Those commuters who come into our city to work and may not pay property taxes but are driving on our roads and are using our parks and are at Como Zoo, they don't pay property taxes, but they do chip into the sales tax. So that's all been a part of a very smart strategy to diversify our funding streams while we do the big development that's necessary to stabilize our tax base for the future.
I see Yan Chen over here shaking her head a little bit. You've talked about cutting unnecessary programs to reduce property taxes. It sounds good to folks who want to control spending, but it's hard to do. If you're mayor, it's year one, month one, what do you cut? Can you name 2 or 3 specific things that you would no longer do as mayor to save money?
I would say, I never said I'm going to cut a program. I always say, we're going to examine individual program and see whether the program has a good performance. If it does, then we have to ask, is it efficient? So the idea is really we need to getting the expense down, not through cutting, but really through a better performance, because we can do it. We have way too many programs could be ineffective. For example, during COVID, we're adding the more program. Have we asked our departments, what was the old program doing? Are they effective? We cannot just increase our budget through the COVID time and without looking at the accountability part.
But is there a specific one that you're zeroing in on that you would say, okay, that's over, COVID's over, let's reduce that? Actually,
I would say there is one department I want to look into it. That is Public Works Department. Public Works Department take $200 million of our city budget, which is the highest budget as overall budget for the Public Works Department. Yet, when I compare with a comparable city like Madison, Wisconsin, their performance is far better than our city. They have similar demographics, similar, they're actually bigger in area, and in addition, their budget is a lot smaller. So we have to, that's kind of program I will look in the individual in details.
We want to get Representative Her into this conversation here. About 2/3 of the mayor's proposed 2026 budget goes to four things: police, fire, public works, park and recreation. Within that, salaries and benefits are the main component. How do you maintain service levels and contain property taxes?
Absolutely. So I think that this is where we have to diversify our revenue streams, and we have to look at, I think the mayor made the statement that I said I would cut parks and libraries, and I've never said that. I said we would look at their processes and we'd streamline them where there's overlap. That means that we should really look deeply at the levels of government and who is doing which work, and where we can then redeploy those resources. Process improvement, so clearly I might be the only one that has experience in this, doesn't mean elimination of jobs when you find efficiencies. It means that you streamline processes to make them more efficient, which means that they're usually, you cut costs when you do that. I will say that additionally, we have a lot of opportunities in our cities. When we look at where EMS, right, for one example, our EMS is one of the only cities that deliver all of our emergency services from fire. And in my conversations with fires, that we haven't increased our reimbursement rates of the services they provide. We do not actually request reimbursement up to the actual service that we could do for the cost of it. And so just even in doing that, we could bring in millions of dollars new revenues into this that is not a tax onto people. It is that we're billing the insurance company that we're doing the work for.
Mayor, in your response, is this streamlining that she's talking about, is it something that you think is feasible?
I think that's really smart. We ought to be streamlining, which is why we're streamlining. And I'm sure you heard us have a conversation with my staff, with City Council recently, about increasing those EMS fees so that we can solve that. We are streamlining, for example, and I can give actually specific examples of how we can use streamlining in the city. It seems like I'm the only one at the table who can. For example, that EMS program, that's our emergency medical responders. They're the folks who come in the ambulance and they respond when somebody has a coronary event or when somebody has a lower acuity medical event. We created what we call a BLS system, a basic life systems response team, which is essentially a team of EMTs on a van who can come and respond if I sprain my ankle and keep our EMTs kind of there. We created a system that creates what we call our power rig to create a peak staffing model. We know which hours of the day. We know that it's more likely that we're going to get 911 calls at 8 p.m. than at 3 a.m. Historically, we've had a 24-hour shift on our fire department, but we've created peak staffing models to be able to build some of that more effectively. We've got a lot more examples, but you've got your finger up, so it says I'm out of time. But yes, we're doing that work actively.
Quick yes or no question from each of you. We'll start over here with Representative Her. Are you in support of the St. Paul school levy referendum that would seek roughly $37 million per year for a decade?
Well, before I answer that, I do want to just say really quickly that if the mayor is talking about his BLS statement, he has 9 staff being cut from his proposed budget. So you can't talk about how you are working on delivering services when you're actually cutting them to people who need those individuals.
Very quick.
But yes, I do support it. And I will say that I have an urban wealth fund idea that has worked in other major cities around generating revenues that is not a tax. And I'm the only person who has proposed a revenue source that is not a tax.
Well, and this is where it's easy to just say we need lower taxes without practical ideas. I'm the only one at this table who has to have a spreadsheet that equals out at the bottom of the table. The reason we're reducing those services is because we have 3 teams that have on average taken care of about 7 calls a night. We are reducing the staffing, but we'll still provide the exact same services. And so that's actually another smart approach to being able to stabilize the way we're approaching this work. Yes.
School levy, Yan Chen? Why not?
The reason why is very simple. Basically, we haven't looked at our school system. They working the way they can deliver performance. So as a mayor, I will help the school grow by employing a single individual as a school coordinator. And this coordinator will recruit community members and look into what our school performance. Compare with other school systems, we deliver the result what we expect for our taxpayer.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I got that. So 2 yeses on the school levy and 1 no.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's change the subject here to crime and guns. St. Paul has seen major measures of violent crime come down from pandemic-era peaks not long ago. Still, there's this perception that parts of the city are unsafe. So to Representative Her, to start us off, is St. Paul safe? And what is one area you'd ask your public safety team to focus on to make it more safe?
And I think that we ask that question as if like the city of St. Paul is the same across the entire city. I live in a neighborhood, in a district that experiences, I would say, really low levels of crime or what people would perceive as safety issues, right? But if you ask somebody who lives in the east side or somebody who lives in Frogtown, they're going to give you a very different answer. If you ask somebody who lives along the light rail corridor, that they're going to give you a very different answer. And so I think that there needs to be nuance in these answers, and that when we ask blanket statements like that, it is challenging because there are many, many people in our city who do not feel safe. And when we think about violent crime, as if that is all crime encompasses, it's just not true. And so what I would do is that for one particular issue around fentanyl and the addiction issue is that for people who are not familiar with that, like when they see someone who's overdosed, like whether they're feeling fear for themselves as well because they are not familiar with the situation. Or, you know, as my own children who ride the light rail and they see somebody shooting up next to them in one of the cars, that like it's not safe for young women to be taking that and being exposed to that. So I say that there's a lot of work that we have to do around that. I would work with law enforcement. I would work with our nonprofit partners who I've already had preliminary conversations with about their capacity in order to take people who have addiction issues, in order for us to work with our congressional level who has some of the funding that can bring in additional resources around Suboxone so that we have that available, and that also work with our healthcare institutions who right now are dealing with the crisis around how to deal with these emergency services, that we have to actually bring everyone to the table when we talk about public safety and addressing that issue.
Thank you. Let's get Yan Chen in here. Is St. Paul safe? And if not, what's one area your public safety team would focus on?
No, people have the perceived feel. There is a perceived unsafety, and it is real, right? Because I think petty crime is a big issue. And one of the things, in order to solve the crime issue, I think we have to learn one thing. That's our root cause, is we need to learn how to rehabilitating people. If we don't know how to learn how to rehabilitating people, we will never solve the crime issue. Because America is a free society. People will have the opportunity, sorry to say that, make a mistake again and again. So that's what we need to do. And the good news is this is not our city's money we need to use to solve that problem. That's a county issue, that's a state issue, but as mayor, I will work closely with them and work with our police department. Together, we can solve this problem.
Mayor Carter, is there a new point of emphasis you'd put on combating real or perceived matters of safety if you had a new term?
Well, the other folks at this table have just told you that St. Paul is a safe city. And by virtue of saying that our top priority on public safety is petty crime, I think that was the word that you used, that is to say that this is a safe city. We're not done yet. And to your point, Representative Her, I think we should have a mayor who's lived on the east side, who's lived in Frogtown, who's lived along the light rail corridor, which is me, which is why we focus so heavily on that. We're really proud that gunshot wounds are down 70% in our city right now as a result of the focus that we've put on gun violence in our community. We're a city of 300,000 people. We have 9 homicides this year and 9 suspects in custody for them. That's unheard of. And other cities across the country and other cities across the state are studying how we've done that. Now, that does show our work is not done and we have more to do. There are people in this community who aren't interested in taking my wallet, but who are living in crisis. And because they're in crisis, it feels uncomfortable for folks. And I think that's a part of that perception issue that we're talking about. In the same, as I said 2 years ago, we're going to make St. Paul the best place on the planet to find second chance and an opportunity, and the worst place to fire a gun. And in the same as we're keeping that promise, we have just proposed $1 million intervention in the same way to focus on fentanyl and quality of life issues that surround that fentanyl crisis. We need a lot more tools. The country needs a lot more tools where this is concerned. We're already working with a particular focus around downtown and around University Avenue to turn the corner. And in that same way, we're saying we're going to make St. Paul the best place that we can to find, to get clean, to get sober, and to find a second chance. And the worst place that you can come to deal fentanyl, I think we can keep that promise the same as we've kept our promises on gun violence.
Representative Her, you brought up your personal experience in these matters. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I will say that no one up here said that the city of St. Paul is safe, and blanket said that. We gave very clear examples about why they're not safe. I will say, though, that I think that it is important for us, and we do this at the legislature, is to not assume people's intentions or to not make statements that are not based in facts, right? And that the fact is that I actually lived on the east side. My first house was bought on the east side. I brought my daughter, whose birthday was yesterday, when she was born, to the east side. My family actually broke the cycle of poverty living in Frogtown and living in Midway, and They were the first people to build businesses along the University Avenue and the light rail. So for us to sit here and make blatant statements because we don't know other people's lives experiences, I think shows the arrogance of how we do this work and not really then understanding the people who are part of those communities.
Mayor Carter, you'll have a chance. I'm coming back to you anyway here on guns, which is a point of focus for you lately. You've suggested that you would seek a new ordinance barring assault-style weapons, even though it could be barred or it could be on shaky legal ground given that state law that bars local gun ordinances. Will you still try to do that with that state law in place? And what would the city gain from inviting a near certain court challenge?
Well, first, Representative Her, you may have misheard me. I didn't say you didn't live there. I said I did. I do live on the east side now.
You were the only one.
I said I do live on the
You were the only one.
You'll have a turn. I did say I do live on the east side, and it said that that along the neighborhood corridor is where my family grew up.
Gun ordinance.
On guns, absolutely. We were at the Capitol today. We have a coalition of 15 cities that we're starting with, and we are actively recruiting additional cities. We're passing 4 measures in St. Paul. St. Paul is going to go first, and other cities are following us as they should. We are going to say we're passing an ordinance that bans public possession of assault weapons. We're banning the devices that turn regular guns into weapons of mass destruction. We are banning guns in libraries and recreation centers, and we're saying every firearm has to have a serial number. Those are things that have 2 things in common. One, every single person you go to school with, every single person you go to church with, every single person you work with thinks that's the bare minimum, and most of them probably think that we already do most of that stuff already. And 2, the state legislature says it's too much. So we're actually preempted from actually enforcing those laws. We've been working very closely with our city attorney and with the Gun Violence Reduction Center at the University of Minnesota to make sure that those laws are written precisely in ways that we can defend in court. And you know what? We have to do something different. The one thing we cannot do is more of the same. This is one of the areas where, I would love to see our legislature, more of our legislative leaders back the governor's call for a special session. We've got to be willing to do something different. If no one else would take a risk, St. Paul will lead.
Yan Chen, what do you make of that approach?
As a politician, one thing I want to do is never promise somebody I can deliver something and yet cannot fulfill my promises. I think we know the assault weapon ban. If Obama cannot pass his legislature, I think we have very little chance as a mayor to do that. But as a mayor, I will focus on one thing. One is work with state government to getting this legislature passed. But more importantly, I will using city resource, work with police department, prevent gun violence.
You're at the Capitol right now. Representative Her, what do you make of his approach, and do you think it has a chance?
Yeah, well, I'm really disappointed at the characterization that legislators are not on board with the governor. We very much are, and we have always been. It's the fact is that you can't just call a special session and expect that we're just going to talk about guns. Only the legislature can adjourn a special session. A governor can call it, but only the legislature can adjourn it, which means if we don't have agreement with the GOP when we go in, we can be stuck at the legislature now debating, repealing, being a trans refuge state, repealing the laws that we passed to protect reproductive rights, repealing the laws that we've passed around paid family leave and earn sick and save time. Like, it puts us at a lot of risk. And so this is not just a matter of people have will to do this. It is that you have to be strategic in what you're doing. And I will say that the state does preempt cities from being able to pass their own legislation around guns, which is why we have been working really hard, which is why I am the chief author of the Lost and Stolen Firearm, which is why that if we go back in the legislature, I will carry one of those bills around regulating ammunition. That those are all things that I have been working on as well. But let's be really clear here. That one of the budgets that has grown is the city attorney's office. Yes, absolutely. When we're defending ourselves from Donald Trump and the awful things that he is doing, we absolutely have to have our own legal team working on that. But to proactively try to pass ordinances that you know will be legally challenged, which means that you are using tax dollars to fight something just so that you can make a stand to say that you've done something, that's super performative. That does not actually move the needle, knowing that you cannot do that because state law preempts you from doing it. Use people's tax dollars. Fight the fight that has to be fought, but don't create new fights that will generate a ton of costs for city residents. Work with your state legislators and understand the legislative process. That's the way to go.
Quick response, Mayor. Do you want to respond to performative?
We had children. Minnesota children were praying in a school, in a church, and the stained glass window above them was shattered as more than 100 rounds rained through their stained glass window. This sounds like a Quentin Tarantino movie, but it's not. It's Minnesota in 2025. And I'm hearing a lot of reasons why we shouldn't do anything, or why we should wait, or why we should be more strategic, or why we should ask more questions. And no, I didn't say every legislator. I said there are some, I think we agree that there are some legislators who oppose any action whatsoever on guns. And if we know, and this is look, I tell folks all the time, when issues prove too hard for the White House, when issues prove too hard for the state capitol, they come to City Hall. And when the Capitol or Washington, D.C. can't do what the vast majority of Americans believe is appropriate, or the vast majority of Minnesotans believe is appropriate on guns, we have to address gun violence. We are fighting gun violence on every single front in St. Paul. That's why gun violence in St. Paul is down by 70%. It would be asinine for us to say we're not willing to fight gun violence in the courts.
We're going to segue from one heavy topic to another heavy topic, which is homelessness. Again, with Mayor Carter, anyone driving through St. Paul sees evidence of how bad the problem of homelessness can be here. Affordable housing, potential solution, it's a long game. It's obviously a tricky one. When you see people holding signs at every busy intersection in town, any busy intersection, what goes through your mind? What does it say about the capital city?
I think that that's an enormous amount of potential that we have an opportunity to capitalize on. We, in my first year as mayor, we had, I think, 19 people sleeping in tents in the city. And we had this big meeting in my office, and I'm oversimplifying, but half the people said we need to bring in, handcuffs and bulldozers, and the other half of the folks said we need to bring in porta potties and help make folks comfortable. I said, look, we can find a much more balanced approach than that. We have built an approach, and this is another area where cities, again, just across the river, cities across the country are studying the way that St. Paul approaches, because we've switched to a by name registry. We have literally a list of names of the individuals in our community and how we're going to work and to connect with them and to facilitate them transitioning back into housing. We have experienced nationwide the largest census as counted by our point in time counts, the largest census of people experiencing homeless shelter since the count began. And so this is a crisis. This is one of those crises that hasn't spared St. Paul, that we're not at all immune from. But the way that we've approached, I'm really proud of. We have closed tent encampments. You can't find on YouTube, you can find lots of videos of different police in different cities clashing with homeless people as they close tent encampments. You can't find one in St. Paul because we've learned how to work directly with folks. That involves spending a lot of time actually inside tents, talking to people and connecting with folks, again, by name. And every single tent encampment we've closed is because every single individual in there has determined they have a better option. We put things into storage. We treat people very incredibly humanely. And it's a long-term challenge. But that's one of those things when folks say this is a long-term challenge, that oftentimes people use that as an excuse to not take it on. We use that as a reason to take it on, which is why we've been able to push so hard. It's not something that we're anywhere close to done on. And it's something, I'll tell you, that challenges us, because if a core city like St. Paul, if we do every single thing that we can to support people who experience unsheltered homelessness, I will tell you that if you spend time in an encampment or if you spend time in a shelter in St. Paul, about half the people, maybe less than half of the people you meet, will actually have grown up in St. Paul, will actually have lived in St. Paul. And you ask folks, and people became housing insecure in some suburb, in some exurb, or some other part of the state. So they moved to St. Paul for those services. We have to have a regional body of support in order to really bend the curve.
We're going to try to get the perspective here of the others here. Representative Her, what would you do differently around homelessness than the current administration?
Yeah, and I would say that we have to start at the basics of actually collaborating and working with other people. That this is not a problem that we solve in isolation. I mean, when I started working on this issue, and this is something that this legislature took up and also put funding towards the unsheltered population, and a lot of that funding, tens of millions of dollars actually in the previous biennium towards this, right? And that I think that what we have to do is realize that within the city of St. Paul, 60% of our homeless population isn't from St. Paul, it's from other areas of Ramsey County. And when I talk to other mayors across the Ramsey County, one of the key things they've said is that we have not, as a city, convened these individuals together. And we can talk about trying to solve this problem, but when we are not working with our suburbs and in the surrounding areas in Ramsey County about the types of homeless shelters they're building, or the deeply affordable or inaffordable housing that they're building, how they're able to address this situation, is that we're not working on it as a cohesive regional thing. And so that there just needs to be more conversation. And I've heard that me asking questions is like shirking responsibility or not doing the work or hiding behind it. But the truth is that you have to ask a lot of questions. And you have to assess who has rich resources. And then you have to be able to work together to build on each other's work and not do things in
Mayor,
isolation.
before we come back to you, we're going to get Yan Chen's ideas here. What is happening that's right or maybe not right here?
I have studied the homeless issue nationwide. And I didn't see sample show up in our model. In fact, I don't think our sample, our city has adjusted its homelessness, how to solve the issue by exam how other cities solve the problem. There's many cities has successfully solved the problem. What I mean by successful, that's integrating people back into the normal population. That's important. Otherwise, we just keep accumulating people more and more to the downward trajectory. And we have to look into how do we solve the problem and what's our result. Have we looked at the performance? Have we know some of the organization doing wonderful job, but some of the organization have our city engage in all of them, trying to figure out the individual performance. My answer is no.
Mayor Carter's real brief here.
And again, just because you're not a part of a conversation doesn't mean a conversation does not exist. We do have a county-wide Heading Home Ramsey coalition, and it's actually chaired by our deputy mayor. And to your point, we one of the incredible things that other cities are studying is our Work Now St. Paul program. If you see people in purple vests in our city downtown or in our parks or along University Avenue helping to clean up, those are individuals who have experienced long-term homelessness who are actively getting work experience through a program that we created just through one of those programs that you don't like, that we created with American Rescue Plan funding.
Okay, so basically the program you create, have you asked how many people really able to go away from their substance abuse issue? Have you, do you look at these type of results?
He's nodding yes, so I think that we'll leave it there and move on to the next.
These topics are not getting lighter. And I'm going to start with you, Yan Chen. We're talking about ICE. We're talking about the National Guard going into cities. Right now, the Trump administration has stepped up immigration actions, including in cities like St. Paul. What, if anything, Yan Chen, should city-affiliated entities do to assist or prevent such operations?
I'm an immigrant myself, and I understand how important immigration policy is for a citizen, for a person like me. However, one of the things what I realized in America for 30 years, our federal government has ignored our own labor force, American labor force. And when a federal government ignore our own labor force, that's the result what we're seeing. They're using right now immigrant as a scapegoat. What I would do is talk to the federal government, really say, look, help us solve the issue at its root cause. That is, let's nurturing American labor force. Let's don't go back to the old war. Whoever the residency is already in our city, let's treat them as our citizens and work with them, help them to be part of our society.
So talk to the federal government. Mayor
Yes.
Carter, is that enough? What should the city be doing to assist or prevent ICE?
I sure wish just talking to the federal government would be enough. It won't be. We were named, I was named very specifically in a White House release just a couple of months ago as an example of a local leader in the country who wasn't going along with Trump's plans. We're not going along with Trump's plans. We've said from the beginning, our police officers will never be ICE agents. All of those violent crime statistics and all the ways in which we're making St. Paul safer is because people trust our police officers. You can't just break that promise for one person. If we break it for one person, we break it citywide. That's not enough either. The Trump administration has threatened us on our sanctuary cities and our ability to connect with the immigrants and refugees in our city on a number of levels. We have 2 lawsuits active against the Trump administration right now. We've won injunctions in both of those. We've got 3 more that we are in the process of preparing right now. And one of them is very specific. We had a political assassination in Minnesota just a couple of months ago. Someone who's very dear to the two of us, our former Speaker of the House, Melissa Hortman, was killed in her home by someone who had a mask on and who was pretending to be law enforcement. We cannot allow people to pretend to be law enforcement, to hide their identity, to be unwilling to show a badge or a uniform, unwilling to show a warrant. LA, for example, has successfully pushed back in court. We're working with LA to follow in their footsteps and do that. And to do more than just be defensive, we created what we call an Office of Immigrant and Refugee Services that connects with organizations citizens in our city that largely serve immigrant and refugee populations, to make sure that people know not only will our police not be out here attacking you, our St. Paul police are really good. They're the best at holding people accountable for breaking the law. We will never criminalize someone's identity, but also you're welcome in our libraries, you're welcome in our parks, you're welcome in our community because you are our community.
Representative Her, is that enough?
So I have a lot to say about this issue, but I'm going to try to just scale back. And I'm glad that the mayor now has actually incorporated some of my talking points from 2 months ago around what we do around face masks, agents, and not having name IDs. But I will say that I did meet with ICE back in April, before I even announced that I was ever running to be mayor. And in that work, like, it's not enough to have conversations with the federal government. They don't care. They're not going after hardened criminals and national security threat. They're going after individual people. With that Supreme Court decision that allows them to target us by the way that we look and our accents, that we are in further danger as being targets. I proposed this months ago already, in that the city has to pass ordinances that prevent ICE from covering their face, and that they need to have identifying badges. The second thing that I will note is that, and I've been working with a coalition of about 100 organizations on helping people and getting the information out to my community about being constitutional observers for people who want to be a part of this, who is not targeted. And then I also want to create a real-time alert system in order to identify, so when ICE is in the neighborhood, to send out an alert so that families do not open their doors and they do not go outside. And we also alert our constitutional observers to be out and to be vigilant.
Mayor, you'll get a chance because there's a similar vein here, but on the National Guard, as part of Fred's question, that in a lot of cities they're being called out to do crowd control or things related to public safety. As mayor, how would you respond to a federal mobilization in St. Paul under circumstances like that?
Yeah, and I imagine we're probably a more agreement at this table than disagreement on some of those things. I hope that would never happen, but we have to be prepared for that, and we can't be surprised by it. The only thing that I would add to what you just said, Representative Her, is we can. And to your point about not doing things that are symbolic and not doing things, making promises that we can't keep, the ICE doesn't care about what ordinances we pass, what city ordinances we pass, which is why we have to fight that in court. I'm not opposed to passing ordinances, but we have to be able to fight that in court as well. That's why we've chosen the court as our primary venue to fight against some of those types of things. We have a really good relationship with our National Guard. We've worked with our National Guard through civil unrest. We've worked with our National Guard through the cyber attack that we experienced last month. And we have a really solid relationship with our National Guard, and we'd have to figure out how to approach that. We'd have to figure out how to connect with our folks. One of the good things is that the character of our National Guard, I'd have to rely on to expect that our National Guard wouldn't be, as we see other places out there, kind of operating in the masks and targeting people in ways that are unfair. But our first step, again, and I've said this multiple times, our first step would be, as cities around the country have done, to challenge every step along the way and not give any inch in court to this notion that our National Guard troops, who are our neighbors, who are our co-workers, who are our community members, can be federalized against us, or even worse, that National Guard troops from some other state can be sent in. That is the opposite of what our founding fathers decided. That's the opposite of what we've decided as a country who we want to be and what the job of our military is and can never be.
I saw Yan Chen and Kaohly Her nodding in any difference in approach.
Yeah, so basically, actually, on this question, we all agree, more or less. The only reason when I say talk to the federal government is really trying to bring the issue. They made a mistake. It's their mistake. They shouldn't be using city resources to correct their mistake. That's when I say talk to them. Doesn't mean I'm not demanding. I'm demanding they back off, because when they made a mistake, they should own it, rather than ask a city to assess them to do things differently.
One more quick topic before we move to kind of more or less a closing section here. Fairly or not, a lot of the public fury directed at city mayors is when residents' trash isn't picked up on time or their street isn't plowed quickly enough. If you're mayor for the next few years, what changes or commitments would you make to residents about how those vital services are handled? We'll start with you, Representative Her.
Yeah, so my commitment is that we do these things, but not just do them equitably. I will say that as somebody who one year I hit 10 potholes and had to replace 10 tires. that I found out that there was a pool of funds that the city actually can reimburse for if they're not taking care of their potholes. And all of my claims were denied. And then when I asked them why were they denied, they gave me examples of why it was denied, and I asked them to relook at it again because those potholes had been reported. And what I found out was that they don't have processes that actually address these issues. They don't have processes that actually look at how we equitably deliver these services. And we can say that we do, but we don't. When I go into the east side, when I go visit my family members there, and my streets south of 94 are plowed, and the streets are very clear, but we don't see that that's the case in Frogtown. I had to park my car on a busy street and walk over because the ruts were so deep and the ice was so compact. That is actually, I went to 2 senior home facilities this past week, and that was the biggest thing they said to us is their streets don't get plowed. And so what I would do is relook at the plan that we have, and we talk about a plan of how we actually do our grid and how we plow or how we fill potholes or the services that we deliver or the garbage that's getting picked up when people are telling me garbage trucks can't get through their alley and their garbage is being left. That to really reanalyze and look at these services, which is why doing process improvement is really important.
Mayor Carter, I'm sure your phone lights up, your email inbox gets full in these instances. What do you want to say about your commitment to these issues in the next term?
This is an area where I'm at a disadvantage of lived experience. I've never driven into 10 potholes in a row. But it's important that this was an afterthought. This is our final question as we go into our closing comments. But a few years ago when I ran for re-election, the only thing we wanted to talk about was infrastructure. A few years before that, our whole city conversation was around trash. We have doubled our pace to rebuild our main roads, which is why infrastructure isn't a center. I mean, one of the most proud things I am around this election campaign is the things that we're not talking about. We're not talking about homicides because we've only had 9 in our city and we've got all 9 suspects in custody. We're not talking about infrastructure because this race doesn't center around infrastructure because we've doubled our investment to rebuild our main roads. And we just in the last couple of months switched the trash hauler for every single resident, every single household in the city. And we're not talking about trash because our team knocked it out of the park so well. That's really incredible. One of the areas we have to grow, and I nerd out, I get excited about hyper municipal things. This year, one of the things that I'm excited about that nobody's as excited as I am about is the fact that for the first time in St. Paul history, you have city employees who are actually picking up the trash. City employees are covering about 10% of the routes in the city right now, which is important. And I'll tell you one example of why. The first day they did that, they finished their routes at about 3 o'clock, and I got a text. I didn't know how much I needed these words in my life, but the text said, "We finished our routes early. We're switching to proactive work on illegal dumping." I didn't know that was my love language, but that's a beautiful thing. And so one of the things that we're going to do is expand the percentage over the years of routes that our city employees can pick up so that we can expand the impact that they're having on it. The fact that this is an afterthought question is an example of really good work being done by a whole lot of city employees.
Yan Chen, your public works pledge to voters.
I would say, as a mayor, actually, I would take responsibility for everything happen under my watch, right? Because that's really mayor's job. And to the performance of what the Mayor Carter just said, I think the question is, do we have the right performance? Trash is a bigger issue. Residents are still not happy about it. Yesterday, we went to West 7 District Council. He didn't show up at the District Council because the trash issue, the trash contract is not fair, and the price is not right for the residents. And the residents just gave up by now. Doesn't mean residents are happy about the trash contract. And here, the data is important. We can compare across the river how Minneapolis do it, compare with how we do it. And then we should start to say, did we do the right thing?
Okay. This will be the final question here, and it's what's your big thing? Campaigns and elections are a chance to vision cast. They're a chance to inspire. As we move to the end of this debate, please focus your closing remarks on the big thing voters can expect from you if they have you as mayor for the next 3 years. So yes, and for our listeners, this is going to be a 3-year term because of a change in the election calendar for St. Paul, moving to even year elections. We're going to give you each about 2 minutes, and we're going to start with you, Yan Chen. What's your big thing?
My biggest thing would be housing. Actually, I think the housing, our residents is not happy with the housing. I think home ownership is really the biggest issue to do it right. However, to do it right, it is really we have to examine a lot of the issue. The issue, some of the mistake is coming from the city. Some of the mistake is from our past administration, and some of the mistake coming from state and from federal mayoral level. So there's multiple mistakes there. But for a city, for a mayor needs connecting dots for residents. And we can do it by using the city resource, because that's what the city really has, connecting the dots for the residents. And as a research biophysicist, I think what I'm proud of is able to solve the problem at its root cause. Is this a close statement?
Yeah, I think we're going to move on to Representative Her. What's your big thing?
Yeah, so my big thing is maybe somebody would look at that and say that it's really a nothing burger. It's not a big thing. My big thing is actually being able to do the nuts and bolts of our city well and being a responsive government. In this conversation, I try to be an eternal optimist, but in this conversation, I heard things like, that we have knocked things out of the ballpark. We've knocked it out of the ballpark. And I think that if you ask residents of our city, are they seeing their lives? Is their lives better now than it was 8 years ago? Are things getting, the way we do work, getting knocked out of the ballpark? And what I will tell you is that having knocked over tens of thousands of doors in just these last few months, that residents are saying our city is not doing well. That when you ask our union members, when you ask our library staff, when you ask our park staffs, if they're being listened to around the issues that they're dealing with as the frontline workers, if you ask our firefighters, if you ask our police, is the city working for the jobs that you have? That overwhelmingly, they will all tell you it is not. And when you ask the partners at the city level and at the state level and at the county level and at the school board level and at the congressional levels, that are you having the partnership you need from our city in order for our city to do well, they will overwhelmingly tell you that is not. And so, and there's a political issue and there's an actual issue, right? There are people who are saying, yes, I support the current administration now. And, our mayor has claimed that he is the majority of the city council members, but behind closed doors, people are not saying what is really happening because they are saying that our city is not doing well. They're not having conversations with City Hall. City Hall is not responsive. And so what I will say is that as a refugee to this country, as someone whose family has broken the cycle of poverty in one generation, and as someone who that really believes in what Melissa Hortman told us, is that these seats do not belong to us. We have to go out to earn the right to have these seats.
Let's move to Mayor Carter here.
Well, I'm just going to finish really quick here that with the 4 priorities of having safe communities, thriving economies, abundant and affordable housing, and protecting our neighbors, that is what people are asking for because we're not hitting it out of the ballpark. Nuts and bolts and being responsive. That is my big plan.
Okay, Mayor Carter, what's your big thing?
Well, you're right, Representative Her. I do have the support of a majority of the city council. That's not a claim, it's math. It's 4 of 7. Our most urgent priorities are addressing the opioid crisis, building way more housing, continuing our momentum downtown, and taking care of our neighbors, particularly the neighbors who are being unfairly targeted by ICE and the neighbors who feel disenfranchised and disempowered in our community. The big thing might be, though, that we just won't get to the St. Paul of the future by repeating all the same processes and all the mistakes of the past. When people say stick to the basics, what they mean is stick to the things that cities have done before. When people say college savings accounts and medical debt and things like that aren't the city's job, what they're saying is stick to the basics, stick to this playbook that we're used to. I ask people a lot of times 2 questions. One, define precedent. Precedent is just the word that we use in the public sector for the way things are always done. And we actually think that means because they've always been done that way, that means that's the way they should always be done. Then I ask them to define the word insanity. That's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I know that we're doing things different. We have to do things different because we face a different time. You're observing that our world is in crisis in ways that no other mayor in our city's history, no other city council member in our city's history, no other era of our city's history has had to address. We are addressing those things. We're not done addressing those things. And let me tell you, we haven't been able to build a wall and keep the opioid crisis or keep the homelessness crisis or keep Donald Trump or keep the pandemic or keep all of the kind of global crises that we've engaged out of our city. But that's why we're building forward. That's why we're doing it together as a community. And that's why I'm running for re-election. I'm asking to be your first choice this year in this election. Please go to my website, melvincarter.org, and check us out and make sure that you get out and vote on or before November 4th.
And that'll do it for the NPR News St. Paul Pioneer Press Mayoral Forum for the City of St. Paul. Thank you to Melvin Carter, Yan Chen, and Kaohly Her for joining us, and for Fred Melo of the Pioneer Press for moderating, along with me, Brian Bakst. This debate was produced by Matt Alvarez and Jeff Jones, with a lot of folks from the NPR News events and technical teams and from the Pioneer Press lending their expertise. We'll have a similar forum in a couple of weeks for the Minneapolis mayoral campaign. And one more heads up, Politics Friday heads to Rochester on Tuesday next week for a special show. Find details at nprevents.org. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.